Good morning, everyone. Good morning and good moed. I'm aware that many of the people that watch these classes are in the USA and they're still celebrating the holy holiday of the last days of Passover, Achron Shel Pesach. Okay, but so today it'll be a short class, but it'll be a class. So at least we'll put our foot into the door of the days of counting the Omer, Sfirat Omer, counting the Omer. Okay. So here's a sentence that, that starts off. This is in the book, which is called Likuti Torah, written by the first Rebbe of Chabad. Likuti Torah, nice thick book, and it is explanations, Hasidic explanations on many of the sentences of the Torah in this case, in the book of Leviticus. Leviticus. Okay, so here we have a sentence. Talks about, no, in Parsha Shmini. In Parsha Shmini, there's a lot of interesting laws here. In Parsha Shmini, 1 second, about what animals are permissible to eat and which are not. And especially, and then it has also laws of fish that do not have fins, scales. You can't eat them. It's forbidden, like eels and that thing. You can't eat them. So laws of interest, interesting laws about, and only relevant to the Jewish people. Only really relevant to the Jewish people. What a non-Jew can eat anything that he wants to, basically, and you can't eat a limb that was taken from an animal when the animal is alive. But except for that, he can eat whatever he wants. Okay, so there's a sentence, an interesting sentence in Psalms, Psalm 104, and the sentence talks about some sort of a big whale, that this sort of a mystical whale, which is going to be the food of the Tzadikim in the future, and it's also going to have a big battle with a big ox in the future. And this doesn't really make too much sense to us. It sort of seems sort of, how do you say, fantastical fantasy. But it's really going to happen. So the point of it is to tell us that there's a lot of things going on in the world that we don't know about. And in fact, we don't know about anything that's going on in the spiritual worlds. We don't know anything what's happening in the spiritual worlds. But really, even in the physical world, we understand very, very little about what's happening. And especially because we don't see that this world is just, first of all, how important it is to God. And second, what are all the spiritual dynamics that are going on in order for just a simple thing going in this world to happen. And conversely, what tremendously spiritual effects this physical world has on the upper worlds. So when we do something good, there's tremendous effects on the upper worlds. Tremendous effects on the upper worlds. And in order for anything to happen in this world, also there has to be all these spiritual. I mean, it's something like, but not really, but it's something like a human being. A human being, things that happen in this world have a tremendous effect on our psyche and our body, our anatomy, right? I mean, the anxiety causes problems in the heart and the lungs and the this and that. Sadness, depression, this is the heartbreak and stomach ache and all that. And conversely, in order for us to do anything in the world, there's amazing processes that have to be completed in order for impulses in our brain to come through our spine, and then they come through to the nerves, and the nerves move the muscles, and the muscles move the bones, and that coordinates with the skin, so we feel what we're doing, etc. Okay, so in other words, there's a big churning going on in each one of us, our spiritual or we want to call it internal organs in our internal feelings are affected by our actions. And in order for there to be actions, there has to be this big internal process that goes on, right? In order for things to go, okay. So the same thing is in the spiritual. That's what the Rebbe is trying to get over it. There are these upper spiritual worlds, and there's a lot of these religions and mystical religions that they deal with the mystical aspects of the world, but almost all of them, they don't get it exactly right. I mean, they do get it somewhat right because it's right enough for people to believe in it. But most of them leave out, maybe even all of them, leave out what happens when we do something in this world. What are the effects? How much God cares about, God himself cares about this world. The process is not just a mechanical process like a robot or something like that. It's alive. And God really cares about what happens in this world. And so now that's what we're going to learn about. Ready? And that's the reason why God chose the Jewish people. He chose the Jewish people to make everyone in the world aware of this, of how important this physical world is, how much love is involved for God to create us and keep us alive. Each and every human being. And not only human beings, I mean, also everything that's really created is created from God's love. But that's coming from God to us, but also it goes the opposite way as well. What we do has an effect on God. Doesn't make any sense, but that's the way it goes. Well, the more we learn about this, we'll come to understand that really nothing really makes any sense. You know, reality is so incredibly, how do you call it, real, that we can't possibly touch even the corner of it. What's going, just for an example, who would dream from all the philosophers, right? There's great philosophers in the world, you know, Aristotle and, you know, and Plato and Kant and, you know, all these guys, Leibniz and all these people, amazing, deep, huge, genius minds that they have. And none of them came to any sort of conclusion that if a Jew does a commandment, it has an effect on the whole world. Not one of them. Right? Especially the Jewish ones, Spinoza and these guys, they said there's no point in the whole, God doesn't care at all about anything. Anything. And it's a big lie. It's not so. God really cares about every single detail. And when a Jew does a commandment, it has a tremendous effect. So that's what we're going to learn a little bit about. Ready? Let's go. So there's a sentence in Psalms, Psalm 104. And it talks about the greatness of God and how God is creating all these things. We say this also on Rosh Chodesh, the first day of Rosh Chodesh, in our prayers. So it says, Leviathan, this big whale, Zeh Yatzarta l'sachik bo. You created in order to play with it. God created this big whale to play with this whale. God plays with a whale. Huh? That's the God of the Jews, plays with whales. What type of a thing is? What's this talking about? Okay, we'll see. Yisab Midrash Rabbah, it says in the Midrash, Parsha Shmini, Perek Yud Gimel, okay, Behemot v'Leviathan. It says the Behemot, something that's called the big ox, the pure ox, whatever, the outside ox, Shor Bar. It says in the future, Behemot v'Leviathan, this big ox and this whale, Heim Kenigon Shel Tzadikim. They will be the entertainment for the Tzadikim. Lati Lavo in the future. In the future. Right? Mashiach comes, starts making the world the way it's supposed to be. Then will be revealed all of the upper worlds. Will be a big circus up there because of what we do, because of what we've done also. So it says one of the big features is going to be that this big ox and this big whale will have a sort of a fight, a battle. Be'emot notetz l'Leviathan b'karnov. Be'emot, this ox will gore the whale or the fish, whatever. You'll see it's not exactly a whale, with its horns, v'koro, and wound it, tear it open, whip. Leviathan, and Leviathan, this big whale, this big fish, whatever, notetz leveima, he will stab the big ox, Basan Pirov, with his fins. So that sort of takes, I don't think that whales have fins, do they? Whales have fins? I don't think so. Whales are mammals, right? They don't have, anyway. Okay, Sampirov. Venotro, and he will, Nochro, and he will kill it. Nechira means that they killed it. It said the Shchita and Nechira, right? So that's what it says in the Midrash. V'lo kachtaninu, did we not learn in another place? Hakol shochtim, you can slaughter an animal. Right? There's laws of ritual slaughtering. How you use them? It says after that the ox becomes a meal for the tzadikim. It becomes a big meal for the tzadikim. This ox and this fish, they fight. And then afterwards, they become a meal for the tzadikim. I guess that's part of this kenigan, of this entertainment. They become a meal. Good morning. Okay, so what are we learning? We're learning here. It says like this. I'll just start from the beginning. It says in the Midrash, this week's Torah portion is Shemini. It talks about what animals are kosher, what animals are not kosher. Okay. Especially talks about the fish also, which fish are kosher. So it says that in the future, there's going to be entertainment for the tzaddikim, that there'll be a big a cow, a big ox, and a big, huge fish, and they'll have a war between each other. The ox will gore the fish, and the fish will slaughter the ox, and it'll be a big meal for the tzaddikim. Says the Rebbe, didn't we learn in another place? It says in the Mishnah, in Chulin, that you can slaughter animals. You want to slaughter animals? According to Judaism, you have to slaughter an animal. A non-Jew can eat an animal even if it was dead in the street, right? You can eat an animal. A cow got hit by a car, you can eat it. A non-Jew cannot eat an animal like that. A non-Jew, the animal has to be slaughtered properly. And there's a lot of laws, very exact laws. And one of the laws is that it has to be slaughtered with a smooth, sharp knife. The knife has to be incredibly smooth. And you're not allowed to slaughter an animal. If you wanted, first of all, you can't slaughter every animal. You can't eat you can only eat cows and sheep and goats. Those are the only three animals that Jews can eat: cows and sheep and goats. Animals. Then birds. There's birds you can eat. There's also stipulations for that. But when you slaughter the animal has to be slaughtered in exactly the right place. And there's laws about that. And the knife has to be smooth. And that's what it says. But no knife can be made of anything. You can slaughter the animal with a piece of glass, with a stone, but it has to be smooth and straight. Smooth and straight. It says sharp also. It says you can slaughter with anything. Bakal shochtin. Anyone can slaughter. A man can slaughter. Bakal shochtin. And with it, you can slaughter with anything. You can shecht at any time. Okay, afterwards the Mishnah gives certain stipulations. Not every time. You're not supposed to, not on Shabbat, and said chutz mimagal katzir, except with a saw. Why? Why doesn't it slaughter with a saw? Because a saw is serrated; it goes up and down, and the slaughtering knife has to be smooth. So how can it possibly be that in the future this fish will slaughter the cow, and the cow will be permissible? The cow will be permissible. It's slaughtering with its fins. Fins aren't straight. The answer is, it says, Chirush Torah mi'iti teitze. It says there's going to be a new Torah that's coming. That's where this idea of Moshiach is going to bring a new Torah. In Isaiah, it says that the Torah is going to come out from me. And in the Midrash, it says over here that it's going to be a new Torah. What does it mean? What type of a new Torah is going to be? Every letter of the Torah is true. It's eternal. You can't change. Jews are always going to put on tefillin. Shabbat is always going to be, and the day that it's supposed to be. All the laws are eternal. They're not going to change. Not going to change what the laws are. So what does it mean? What does it mean, a new Torah? It says a new Torah means two things. Number one, it means that that we'll feel the godliness in the Torah. And the other one means that certain laws will be changed. Which laws will be changed? This one, the laws will be changed that a cow can be slaughtered with the fins of a fish. And also that a fish can do slaughtering. Usually only a Jew can slaughter. If a non-Jew slaughters an animal, no matter how proficient he is, it's not good. It's just one of the laws of the Torah. Just like you have to put the tefillin on the arm you don't write with. But if you're left-handed, you put tefillin on your right arm. It's not because one arm is better than the other. That's what the Torah decided. So it says this laws will be changed. Right? Actually, it doesn't say in the Torah how you're supposed to slaughter. It just says slaughtering. God says to Moses, you should slaughter animals like I showed you on Mount Sinai, like I showed you. It doesn't give the clear law, like I showed you. And the rabbi said that's what it says. In the future, there's going to be a new law. What's the big deal? This one law. Except for that, there's nothing's going to be changed. This one law that's what it means, a new Torah. Okay. Shakodesh Baruch Hu, the God, Yatir, will permit then slaughtering an animal, Zu, Sheyishchot, Lovayatan, that a fish can slaughter a ox, Besampirov, with its fins. Ubehemot, and these, what are this behemot? What is this ox? What are going to be? It says, Zehu, this is what's called Shur Habar. This is what's called the pure ox, or the outside ox, or the powerful ox, whatever. It's not a huge ox, right? To understand, let's understand, what is this battle going to be of the Leviathan with the Shurabar? What's it going to be? Why is it important to us? What do we care? What are we talking about this? Says the Rebbe, and like we just, that's how the introduction I just gave to the class. The spiritual worlds are infinitely important, very, very important, infinitely important. They're tremendously important in order to understand what this world is going on. Now, God is not spiritual. God creates the spiritual, but God is found in everything. Everything is hinting at the Creator, every creation. And the spiritual worlds are hinting more at the Creator, or at least more clearly at the Creator than this world. Why? Because we don't have any idea what the spiritual worlds are. And we also know what God is, but they both exist. So by understanding the spiritual, we get a little bit of an idea of how far away we are from having any comprehension of what God is whatsoever, because we don't even understand the spiritual worlds. And there's levels and levels of spirituality that maybe we can scrape the bottom of the lowest spiritual world we can understand. And, and that barely we can at least understand that there is such a thing. How much more so we can't understand God? But on the other hand, God is creating us. There's nothing more obvious and clear that God exists, because the world exists. It's being created by God. But here Judaism wants to set another thing, that God cares. God cares about every detail, and we have an effect on God. When God cares about the world, like we see with the flood, God got mad, right? When it says Noah came out from the ark, he made as sacrifices, God was pleased. So we see that God as infinitely above the infinite. God is, the spiritual is infinite. God's above that. But God is not limited to being unlimited. He's not limited to being spiritual or above the spiritual, whatever you want to call it. God also cares about every little minute, apparently insignificant detail of this world, especially the Jewish people. That's what Chassidut teaches. Okay. So here we got, so if you want to start getting into these spiritual worlds, here we go. Who would dream? The important thing is this big fish and this big ox. That's tremendously important. And that's going to make a pleasure for the tzadikim, for the righteous Jews in the future. And it is like this. There's two types of tzadikim. Okay, let me make this a little bit bigger. 1 second. Two types of tzadikim. Make the words a little bit bigger here. How is this going on here? Why isn't it working for me? All right, maybe I gotta go like this. Oh, there we go. All right, there's two types of tzaddikim. Here we go. And yes, there's base meaning tzaddikim. There's two types of tzaddikim. Okay, now again, what is a tzaddik? What is a tzaddik? A tzaddik is a Jew that he does his whole life, every moment, exactly what God wants, and says what God wants, and thinks what God wants. That's called a tzaddik. He doesn't how do you say, consider himself. He's a creation of God, whatever God wants. The example of this, we'll see. He doesn't bring this example, but it's like King David, right? King David, Moses, right? They didn't even sleep. They were so dynamic. When a person really feels God, devotes himself to God, then he becomes tremendously full of energy and he's really involved in the world. He doesn't sit on a mountain, really. Okay, there's two different types of tzaddikim. Right? One of them is one like a fish. The other one is like the ox. One of them is shehem beseter she'avodatam. They are beseter, concealed. She'avodatam beruchniut. That their whole service of God is spiritual. Perish b'kavanat alev, with the intention of their heart. Liyached yechudim milyonim, that they can actually make upper unities, b'bechinat eliot, and elevations. In other words, their mind is open, so much open to the Creator. They feel God in everything, and they feel God in the spiritual worlds, and therefore they can be aware of the spiritual worlds and higher levels of spiritual worlds and higher levels of spiritual worlds, more and more awareness of the goodness and the love and the essence of what God is. Huh? Like, for instance, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. It says when Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai was in a cave, he had to hide out in a cave from the Romans because he spoke out against the Romans. Everyone else was afraid to speak out against them, and he spoke out against the Romans. And he had to hide away. He went up into the hills over there of, where is in Miron and Sfat, over there in the northern part of Israel, and he hid in an, he couldn't go out. He couldn't go out. They were looking around for him constantly, 13 years. Shebavadai, that certainly in that 13 years, he was not able to do commandments. Like, for instance, the mitzvahs maisios, commandments, shahari lo ayil nizonim, rak micharova. It says they miraculously grew in this cave that they were in. There miraculously grew a carob tree. Carob, I don't know how they say it in English, carob. Anyway, it's a terrible fruit. And that's what they ate for 13 years. And he didn't go out. I mean, I'm sure that, if there was any reason to leave the cave, it would be to get some other type of food, but they didn't. And there was a miraculously grew a well of water, a spring of water was in it, and that's what they lived on. He and his son were there for 13 years. So it says that whole 13 years he couldn't go out. The Ain of the Mine, the spring of water, the Ivri that was created for them. If so, lo kayim achilat matzah. He couldn't eat matzah on Passover. He couldn't make kiddush on wine. He couldn't take an etrog and a lulav or a sukkah. Couldn't do any physical things. Maybe he took tefillin with him. I imagine he did. Put tefillin with him. But who knows? In any case, all that time he couldn't do any of the commandments. Also, the Arizal. The Arizal was the Rishon Bar Yochai that was like 1,600-700 years ago, something like that. And the Arizal, that was like 400 years ago. But he was a tremendously spiritual person. Lo Yagam came. Yagam also was in this level. What does it mean? It says like it says in the Zohar, Chilek Gimel. It says Vayidgu l'rov l'kerev, or it says they were like fish. They were like fish. Okay, that's one type of tzadikim. Another type of tzadikim are oto tzadikim, those tzadikim that they are revealed. Shabodatam, that their service is in Gashma, is physical, Bekium mitzvahs, and doing the commandments. Maisios, Besimcha b'chagecha, having joy in the holidays. Maybe we can say, I'm just going out on a limb like this, but let's say that's like King David. Everything was revealed. He had to fight battles. He was in the world. It was in the world. Of course, listen, by King David also, what we see of King David was only 1/100% of who he was. But still, the main thing we see of King David is that he was a king. He was occupied in the world. This is also drawing down upper lights about the holidays and etc. This is revealed godliness in the world that was revealed. But those are tzadikim that they are doing things, and the main thing is revealing in the world. This is by means of the commandments, ba'avoda, that they, the uvda davka, doing things. Their main thing is doing. So there's two types of tzaddikim. One, the main thing of them is internal, like prayer, right? They made big changes, huge, amazing changes in the upper worlds, which had their effect in this world. It says because of the merit of Shimon Bar Yochai is that the generation was protected. It says that there was no rainbow in the sky to show that God didn't have to remind himself of the covenant that he made with the world, that he wasn't going to destroy the world again in the flood. Every generation he had to have the rainbow to remind him, so to speak, of this covenant. And Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai's generation, you didn't need it. He protected the whole entire generation. And what did he do, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai? He learned Torah, and also he prayed. There were thousands of great men like him. It says, but maybe externally there were, but internally there wasn't. No one was like Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. Internally, he knew all the secrets. He was involved in. It says in the time of that's internal tzadikim. That's in a way those are true tzadikim. Then there's those that are more external, like it says in the time of Holy Temple. There's no joy except with meat, etc. Namely, mitzvahs, shalmei simcha. People would actually bring sacrifices that they would bring every Yom Tov. And now there's only this joy is only with wine, etc. But that's physical. In other words, these tzaddikim are more in the physical world. That's a little bit more, how do you say, in our league. Doing the commandments the way God wants. The Ikar Amshacha, the main thing is on Passover is by matzah, and on Shavuot is by celebrating by the Torah scroll, and on Sukkot is by a sukkah, and lulav, etc. And all those things Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai didn't do when he was in the cave. Ubiladai, without the actual commandments, they can't draw down anything. But Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, that he was like in the level of this Leviathan ben Nuniyomo, he was like a fish. A fish is concealed. He's swimming around in the upper worlds. A fish, the Uzlan B'Yabashta Kanal, is like a fish on the ground. He was here, but he wasn't here. Only one, Kaniska Leil, like it says, Amshich Amshachot, that he draw down when he was in the cave, not by means of doing deeds, by means of his thoughts. Okay, which tzaddikim are greater? So, I mean, obviously the ones that are doing the commandments, right? That's the whole point of the Torah, right? So the Rebbe says, not exactly. You cannot really reach godliness al yadei by means of doing the commandments. After all, even though the commandments come from the essence of God and God's will and everything, but the fact of the matter is that the godliness really comes from the intention. There has to be the spiritual service of the tzaddikim. The aim and Nikram, they're called fish of the sea. So God created the world and he put man in the world, right? He didn't put man in the world just to do things and to avoid things. That, of course, is very important. But he put man into the world in order also to attach his whole being to God. Everything in the world that God creates, all the animals, etc., they're all basically, survival. I read a book by these people are the proponents of what's it called? Evolution. And what's the moving force behind revolution? What's the moving force? What keeps animals that they even want to mate with one another, or is the continuation of the species, whatever? Survival. They want to survive. People are interested in themselves. Survival of the fittest, right? They want to survive. Well, that's how the world goes, but that's not the reason God created the world. God created the world so that godliness will be found in the world. So by doing what God wants, that's amazing. That's wonderful. That's wonderful. But that's not exactly the point. Things have to be done what God wants, but also the way God wants, with the proper intention. And the only ones that really truly have the proper intention, that really have a feeling of what God is, and the true, they say, amazing wonder of what God really is, are these tzaddikim that are like fish. Fish. She'im mechasa nikram nuni yoma. Kadagim, like these fish, shehayam, that the sea covers over them. And that's where they live. Kachem bechinas alma deskasya. The Yeshnam Bakal Dor Vador, Shem Tzadikim Beseta. These are concealed Tzadikim. And they join the upper worlds, Olamot, they join all of the worlds to God. Like it says, King David, here's an example, not like what I said, but King David was like a fish. He joined the Torah with God. So they draw. That's the idea of this fish. This fish that is essential to the world. These are these tzaddikim that are like fish, that they're always attached to God in everything that they do, to the essence of God, to everything they do. They're the ones that really realize how important this world is to God. And the others not so. I mean, this is basically like anything else in the world, right? There's let's say music championships, especially piano. So there's some people that are mechanically perfect, but they just don't have the feeling. They just don't really get it, right? They get the music fantastically, that mechanically and everything is exact, perfect. There's no slurring of notes or whatever. And then there's others that they really get the music. The same thing with sports, the same thing with art, the same thing with this. There's some people that just all of a sudden it just clicks by them. They just get the point of it. Okay, this is talking about music. These are physical things, but they feel the spirituality of it, the meaning of it. It says the same thing as in Judaism. And Judaism is connecting to God through the Torah. And so some of them, the most important thing is the Torah and the laws. And there are other tzaddikim that their most important thing is God. And they really feel God. And that's called the fish. And we're going to talk about that. That's the type of tzaddikim that are the main ones. That's really what makes the world real, keeps the world going. That's what God wants, is this awareness of the Creator. And not everybody can get to it, but those tzaddikim that do, they're called the fish. That's called the big Leviathan, the big fish, the big whale, whatever it is. How this is relevant to us, we're going to see, God willing, tomorrow. Now let's do a Dvar Malchut. We're going to learn Dvar Malchut. Here we go.